was interested in sciences from a very early age. I had a lot of curiosity as a child. I think some of that curiosity was inherent, and some of it was from actually following my father around. My father was an electrical engineer, and he would do various things around the house. And he was very generous in that he let me follow around, and I'm sure that he was pretending to let me help him, but I actually thought I was. So from a pretty early age.
And so he was supportive and encouraged your
Yes.
scientific curiosity.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Some things I invented on my own. For example, not too far from our home was a small park where people would practice, putting and various golf things. So as kids, you could go and you could find golf balls there that people had lost or abandoned or whatever. So we'd, find the 2 or 3 a week that we could, dredge up. And then the big event was to take them home, and if you rub them long enough on a sidewalk, you can actually rub off the white coating. I don't know how many people have seen the inside of a golf ball, but I have. It's actually, at least at that time, it was an enormously long rubber band that was wrapped around an air-filled rubber ball. So if you take a golf ball apart, that's what it looks like. So an experimentalist from a young age.
So I'm laughing pretty hard because I'm a golfer. I love to golf, and I have this visual of you on a sidewalk rubbing, and I'm trying to get some perspective on how long it takes you to rub.
It takes a while, let me tell you. Hours.
Resilience.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Persistence, right? Yes. Kids during the summer, what have they got to do, right?
Oh my goodness, that's funny. You mentioned your father, and I know that your parents fled Soviet-occupied Latvia, spent time in a refugee camp before they came to the United States, and that must have had a lot of influence on, obviously, their life experience and possibly yours growing up. Can you tell us about that?
My parents' history definitely influenced both their life and my life. When my parents arrived in this country after being refugees of the Second World War, they basically arrived with my sister, who must have been maybe 7 or 8 at the time, my brother, who was an infant, and I was born later in this country. And they arrived with 2 suitcases, basically what they could carry. My father was a trained electrical engineer. My mother actually was an economist, so she had finished a degree in economics at the university and came from a very well-to-do family, and they both basically left everything behind. And from a young age, my father told me 2 things. He said, "You cannot predict what life circumstances will bring." He said, "Life can take everything away from you, but if you have an education, that will stay with you forever." And he was certainly, a living example of that. And the other thing he always told me was, he said, "We are new to this country." He says, "We do not have political or economic connections." He said, "So I can't pull you up." He said, "You have to make it on your own." And I think those 2 life lessons have stuck with me and made a big difference through the course of my life.
Your father emphasized education. So tell us about your educational experience. I mean, starting with The Ohio State University.
Yeah, so The Ohio State University is where I went to graduate school. Interesting story, actually. So as an undergraduate, I was a double major. I was a chemistry and history major in college. And I remember distinctly that my college roommate came to visit me. Must have been the spring of my first year in graduate school. And she asked me, she said, "Gee, you're doing chemistry all the time now. Don't you miss being involved in other things?" Because I used to take classes in many different disciplines as an undergraduate. And I remember telling her, no, in fact, I really like the ability to focus, to do one thing, try to do it well, and really take the opportunity to try to be good at something, to try to understand something and give it my full attention. So for me, Graduate school really was a great experience. I think in some ways it was a better experience than being an undergraduate, because I think as an undergraduate, while I did do many things, I think I lacked that determined focus that, that graduate school gave me, which gave me a real sense of satisfaction. So it's a great experience.
But I'm trying to understand. So you spread yourself around at Ohio State. You were a history major, so you were.
And this was at University of Pennsylvania as an undergraduate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
And okay. Then Ohio State.
Right.
Then North Carolina.
Right.
Postgrad.
Right. Yes.
Yes.
That's right.
Under who?
Professor Royce Murray.
Yeah.
So Royce Murray, very well-known electrochemist, and I spent a year there. And by that time, actually, my husband and I, who met in graduate school, we were married by that time. By the time we were at North Carolina, and then I did an additional year of postdoctoral work with the Austrian group at the University of Buffalo, to other very well-known electrochemists. And after that, went to Greatbatch to work in industry.
So I know Bob and Janet Osteryoung both, and I don't recall the details. Were they there together?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, at the University of Buffalo. Bob and Janet were both there at the University of Buffalo.
You called them the Osteryoung group, so they were both faculty and teaching in the same...
They were both faculty. They were in the same department. They were both in the chemistry department. We had joint group meetings, so while Janet had her own lab and Robert had his own lab, many of the things were common. You know, they had some postdocs who really bounced, you know, between the groups and joint group meetings. So while they did have their independent careers, there was certainly a lot of overlap between what they were doing as well. In other words, you couldn't really interact with one without getting to know the other one pretty well. So, but you know, it was a great experience, but colorful personalities.
That's Royce Murray and the Osteryoungs, and anybody else that you can think of that contributed, mentored, influenced.
I have to tell a story about Royce Murray. I had been with the Osteryoungs for about a year, and I'd been looking around for permanent employment, and at that time I was interested in an industrial job. And so I had a couple opportunities, one of which was Greatbatch. So I called up Royce Murray and I described the opportunities, and I asked him, I said, well, Dr. Murray, what do you think? You know, I can stay on as a postdoc, or do you think that these opportunities, this one opportunity specifically at Greatbatch, is interesting enough that I should give it a try? And his response was, Esther, I don't think the hog is going to get any fatter. So I said, thank you very much, Professor Murray, and promptly went home and asked my husband, what the heck does that mean? And I think he meant in his own Southern charm kind of way, it's a good opportunity, go for it. He claims he doesn't remember saying that, but he did.
So what was your reservation?
I think that at that time it was really just the unknown. You know, that I knew what life in academics was like. You know, it was interesting work, and at that time Greatbatch was a fairly small company. It was a family-owned business, and while it wasn't a tiny startup, it had, you know, maybe a couple hundred people. It was a question of, well, you know, should I take the leap, you know, and you know, start a job, and this question may come up someplace along the line, but you know, you look back on your life and you think about critical decisions that you made, and that was really a landmark decision in my career. I didn't know it at the time, but looking back now, that advice from Professor Murray and the decision to take that job in many ways changed my life.
Well, you're locked into our staff because I'm just about to get to it. That question was characterized as what you thought your first big break was, and it sounds like the decision to go there was maybe not a break, but a critical step.
Critical step was the decision to accept the job at Greatbatch. Then the other and I will call it break, was that the first project that I was assigned to was an incredibly important project. And that was the development of the battery for the implantable cardiac defibrillator. And we knew that there was a potential market opportunity, and that's why we were pursuing it, because we could identify a market need for a battery. There was a device that existed. It had a battery, but the battery only lasted about a year and a half or so. And so our deliberate goal was to develop a battery that could last 3.5 to 5 years, which compared to what was available at the time would be a really big breakthrough. And I think that was really a fortunate thing that my first project ended up being a very important project. I think success of a project depends on the person, but the impact of the project sometimes depends on the project itself. And in this case, it was a combination of both things.
And so, did you see that you could create that kind of opportunity at Greatbatch when you were looking at that young company, not very large? Was it the things they were doing? Was it Wilson Greatbatch himself?
It was a great place to work. Just exciting. Mr. Greatbatch at that time was not running the company, but he was always around in some sense. You know, he would walk through the hallways and participate in company events, but he was officially not running the company. But it was an incredibly exciting time because many medical devices were just coming into reality. I mean, they had been, you know, worked on perhaps for even decades, but they were coming into reality. And we really felt like we were able to make a contribution, do something important, make a difference. And the advantage of the company being small was that each one of us thought that we mattered, that what we did really did matter, that it wasn't, oh, well, if I don't do it today, somebody else will do it. It was really a matter of, we better get this done because we've got to get this product to market. And so that kind of drive, enthusiasm, and a tremendous level of support for research, development, and technology. It was a really rare environment and a great place to be. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
I'd like to know a little bit more. So I've met Mr. Greatbatch, and it was a very interesting experience.
He was absolutely a serial entrepreneur. He was an inventor, he was a dreamer, and for him, once a company was working, running the company was just, that's not him. You know, but he was always thinking, always, you know, creating some new goal, some new need. Remarkable man, really remarkable man. But at the same time, he was incredibly down to earth. I knew him fairly well because he would come to the company and he loved talking, you know, science. But along with talking science, the down to earth, I remember one time, it was during, it must have been, had to have been springtime, right? He's walking down the hall and he's looking for me. And he says, Esther, I need a pH meter. I'm like, okay, Mr. Greatbatch, I'll see if we can find a pH meter for you. And then he's like, well, maybe even pH paper will be good enough. And then he starts explaining his dilemma. Well, I've been using chicken manure to fertilize my garden, and now my shovels are starting to rust. So I need to measure the pH of this dirt because I just can't have rusted tools, you know. So, you know, on one side, he's trying to develop an MRI-compatible pacemaker, and he's worried about his pitchfork rusting, you know, that he's using to turn the dirt in his garden. I mean, he's just a remarkable man, really remarkable man.
Anybody else in the company that had an influence on your work and made it happen there?
Actually, a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know, there are many, too numerous to name, but I think another real driving force of the company was a person named Ralph Meade. Ralph Meade might have been employee number 2 after Mr. Greatbatch, who was probably employee number 1. And it turned out that the Wurlitzer company, known of course for, you know, jukeboxes and, you know, things like that, during the Second World War, made thermal batteries. So there was a dry room and an entire group of people who worked on thermal batteries right in Buffalo, New York. And Ralph Meade was one of their lead people. And when Mr. Greatbatch had this idea about developing an improved battery for a pacemaker, he somehow connected with this battery group at Wurlitzer, and I think the battery work there was winding down, and hired most or many of them, and they ended up being the first group of employees at Greatbatch. So they we referred to them as the Wurlitzer group or something. So you knew if somebody had started from Wurlitzer that they were kind of a long-term employee, that they had been there a long time. So so Ralph Meade was the one who, before I joined the company, he had really been, I think, instrumental in getting the lithium iodine pacemaker battery manufacturing and design, up and running. And he was still there, and I think fairly strong personality, and still kind of influenced the research on things when I first joined the company. So yeah, and many after that I interacted with over the years.
Well, your group, yourself, pretty productive there. One of the things I want to bring out is that you or the recipient of 150 U.S. patents.
Yeah.
The most of any woman in this country. And are they all? Was it all at that? That's a phenomenal number.
Yeah. Yeah.
All through your work at Greatbatch?
The 150 certainly is. There's more now that we're filing, in the university. It ended up being a very deliberate and strategic thing. There were other companies who were developing batteries and medical batteries, including some of our customers, which was an interesting situation. For example, Medtronic Company had, and does have, a very capable battery group. So our strategy was, as a fairly small entity with, only a few R&D people, that intellectual property would be the way that we would compete. That if we were deliberate and smart about how we got intellectual property, both in terms of the battery itself, but the construction, the design, the materials, the application, then we would be able to maintain the leadership in that area because of the intellectual property. And I still think it was a smart way to go, and for many, many, many years, those patents really made a big difference in terms of Greatbatch being able to be competitive and be a manufacturing leader in terms of implantable medical batteries. So it was a deliberate decision. It wasn't an accident that the patents just kind of came around. It was deliberate strategy.
What else can you share about the strategy behind the cardiac defibrillator?
So the driving goals were really certainly lifetime reliability and safety. So in the early days, the quality, reliability, and the ability to help the patients were paramount. And during the time that I was there, the company in many ways, in terms of the manufacturing setting, underwent several renaissance areas, I guess, because originally the quality was oftentimes designed in, but then also inspected in, and then as the company matured, more and more of the quality came through process control and very tight process control. But it was a great project to be part of, a great team of people to work with, both in research, manufacturing, and engineering, and a very exciting time to be there.
Anything else that you would like to share about your accomplishments, things that you did while you were at Greatbatch?
The other comment that I would make is that we had the opportunity to work on a diversity of a diversity of projects for different applications, so pacemakers, implantable drug delivery systems, implantable neurostimulators, as well as actually batteries for industrial applications, so very high temperature, very high vibration environments. So when I look back at that experience, actually, it prepared me in many ways to face the challenges that we face today in terms of batteries. Mm-hmm. The batteries today that people talk about and use most commonly are lithium-ion, and they surround our world, right? Laptops, cell phones, all the electronic devices that we carry around. But the big challenge is now to transition to electric vehicles mm-hmm. that have very long lifetime, perhaps batteries to back up grid or renewable energy sources that have even longer lifetime. Grid companies talk in terms of 20 years, 30 years. And the strategies that we used in terms of scientific and technological strategies to extend the lifetime of batteries are applicable to other battery systems as well. So I think the experience in thinking about surviving harsh environments and extending lifetimes has really set the stage for being able to apply those skills to many different batteries and different applications as well.
Which leads us to what you're doing now. So how many years at Greatbatch?
22.
And then you moved in to Stony Brook.
So I moved to University of Buffalo first. Mm-hmm. In 2007,
right.
And then in 2012 moved to Stony Brook University, and I have a joint appointment also at Brookhaven National Lab.
Right. And so what are you working on now?
Batteries.
I think you just described it for us, but maybe.
It's that's what's been so great about the career that I've had, but really a career in electrochemistry. And I don't know if you're going to ask the question later or not, but I have to tell you that coming to ECS meetings in the Electrochemical Society really is always a highlight of my year, and it's absolutely my favorite society.
Well, you knew I was going to get to that, but thank you.
But because it's such a rare experience to sit through the course of a day of talks and hear everything from extraordinarily fundamental, molecular level research all the way through thinking about process, and then including, testing and simulation of completed, multi-scale batteries, all in the same day. It's just mm-hmm. remarkable. So what are we doing now? What is really exciting now is that we are working on a variety of applications. Batteries for medical devices, actually we have funding from National Institutes of Health, so we're continuing to work in that area. But we are also thinking about new materials, rechargeable batteries, thinking about vehicle-based batteries, and ultimately batteries for the grid. Mm-hmm. And the tools in terms of instrumentation that are available at places like Brookhaven National Labs are just transformative. For many years, I think back to Greatbatch, the way to test what happened in the battery is you would test the battery and then by various means cut it apart and then look at the pieces and hope that the pieces weren't too damaged to figure out, what went on, right? And now there are actually tools, for example, high energy X-rays, where we can take a working battery in a stainless steel housing, stick it in the X-ray beam, and actually measure the diffraction, cross sections of the cathode as the battery, discharge is progressing, mm-hmm. to find out at what interface, what is happening, and find out not only what's happening, but get locational information so we can construct a 3D spatial map. And in many ways it is just because of the tools that are available, to me, an opportunity to discover things that only a few years ago wouldn't have been possible because the methods didn't exist. So it's really a fun time.
Sounds like even after 150 patents, the excitement is still yet to come.
Oh, it's not going away, and I really like working at a university, working with graduate students. We have an exceptional group of graduate students and postdocs. They're really talented, they're motivated, they're great people, they have ideas, they ask questions, and that's part of what makes it so interesting, is that we keep them on their toes, but they keep us on our toes as well. It's a really excellent dynamic, I think.
Yes, you have the many years in industry, been on faculty now, and now the affiliation with Argonne.
Right.
So the national lab, academia, industry, can you compare and contrast for us?
Yeah, I can. In industry, one of the big differences is that industries in general have a fair amount of infrastructure. So there would be, folks who would be responsible for IT. There are administrative assistants, there are technicians, there are people who worry about maintaining facilities. So in general, when something goes wrong or when you need something, there's a procurement office, right? So you deal with the people that you need to deal with. There's a travel office, so there's just a lot of support. And if there's an important problem or an important opportunity, a problem not necessarily in a bad way, but an important opportunity, a company can really marshal resources quickly and say, okay, we need to put more people on a problem, and they can just go for it and really move things along fairly quickly. Let me contrast academics as the opposite end of things. I remember distinctly my first day at the University of Buffalo as a faculty member. I was given an office key, and I had a laboratory assigned to me, so I walk into the office, and I think there was a broken desk and no chair. So that was my office, right? And so my first goal was, well, maybe I better buy some office furniture because I need a place to sit, And then the lab was actually a very nice lab, but there's nothing in it. So you basically start from nothing and learn very early on that being a faculty member is almost like running a small business, because you're in charge of personnel, which means recruiting students, training students. You're certainly in charge of finance, meaning you better write proposals, bring in money, and then it's up to you to manage the money. All of those grants, you have to manage how you spend it and, keep track of everything. Certainly chief technical officer, because you're responsible for all the science that's coming out. And then everything that goes wrong, by and large, is the faculty member's issue. I mean, it's not that there's no support, but if an instrument breaks, then you've got to figure out what to do. We had, leaking ceilings, and it was up to us to, find tarps and, cover up our glove boxes before they got flooded, from whatever it was that was leaking up above. And that it just struck me early on, the amazing contrast in infrastructure, that you start basically with an empty room and okay, create a career, as opposed to joining a company where there's basic infrastructure in place. So but the flip side of that is that as a university professor, all of that responsibility is yours, but then it's all the decisions are yours as well. So you can choose to go whatever direction you want, and if you can get it funded, then you can conduct that research. So, early on, so I was really lucky in that when I joined the University of Buffalo, my husband was already a faculty member there, so he knew many things about what life, at that university in particular was like. And the other thing that I was very fortunate was that Amy Marshallock, who who had been a PhD student at the University of Buffalo and then joined Greatbatch, when I decided to leave and go to the university, she says, "I'm coming with you." And so I've had the opportunity to work with my husband and Amy Marshallock, who have been really the kind of the core team that has made our whole research effort possible. It's been just a fantastic, fantastic partnership, and really I have to thank them enormously. That it's a rare opportunity to be able to work with such talented people, over a prolonged period of time.
Now that you've been in academia for a while, the family tree, which becomes so important in the lives of a faculty member.
Yeah. So I started, 2007. So that's about 7 years ago. So I have a number of PhDs who have graduated. Most of the PhDs, in fact, all of the PhDs at this point, have opted to go into industry. I think partly it's because there's a lot of opportunities in the battery world, and that's the direction that they've gone. I've graduated a number of master's students as well. And they're in companies, but not just battery companies. They're in a diversity of fields. Some of them working on, everything from power tools to e-cigarettes. So what I'm pleased about is that the former students do keep in touch with us and let us know what they're doing, and they seem to all be doing well and prospering. And now, actually, the current group that we have, I think, about 12 graduate students and 3 postdocs.
Oh.
Several of them are interested in academics. So now, actually, one of the graduate students that my husband has is a faculty member. Several of his students are faculty members. But she's already sent 2 of her graduate students to our group at Stony Brook. So now I guess they would be called what, academic grandchildren, I guess.
That's right. You get the extended family going. That's right. Yeah.
And they're doing really well. Really
well,
exciting.
there is truth to that. It's the connections that I've seen, and you know them all. I think that the strongest one, and certainly when I first came to the society, was the group at Berkeley with Tobias.
Yeah.
And you could be great grandson down there
exactly.
and feel like you're part of the Tobias group.
Yeah, exactly. And everybody would say it. Oh, well, they worked for so-and-so. Who worked for Tobias?
Right.
But the truth is, the graduate school experience, especially at a PhD, I mean, you work so closely with someone, for 4.5, even 5 years. You really get to know them as a person. It becomes... it's almost like an apprenticeship or a mentorship. Sure. And if it's someone that you get along with and respect and feel that has really helped you progress as a scientist and a person, it's something you don't let go of. You maintain those ties for forever, really.
Yeah.
So.
Now you talked about this a little bit, but you have an affiliation with Brookhaven.
Yes.
For how long now?
Since 2012, so 3 years. Yeah.
Anything interesting to know about your national lab experience? So
a national lab, in some ways, in my regard, just in terms of function, is kind of halfway between a company and a university, in the sense that there is much more infrastructure, much more support structure, more staff who are there just to assist with facilities and help the scientists do what they do. The National Labs certainly have incredibly bright people, remarkable instrumentation and facilities. The big difference is that many fewer students. I mean, it's not that there aren't any students in a national lab, but mostly they work with postdocs, or some of the scientists just choose to work independently. So the student aspect of university is kind of a nice aspect, but it is a little more formal, a little bit more more regimented than a university environment. But because I'm used to an industrial environment, it comes pretty readily to me. So.
I'd like to know what you mean by more formal.
For example, there are very specific training things that you have to go through. And they take safety extremely seriously and have very well-defined processes for safety. You know, how you order chemicals, you know, how you set up labs, dedicated people who audit, you know, the procedures that you use and audit the labs. And certainly universities take safety to heart as well, but I would say that more of the responsibility lies with the individual PI. And of course, you know, with any scientific undertaking, the ultimate responsibility does lie with each independent researcher, but there's just more infrastructure at a national lab. So, you know, they would have, you know, IT groups and, you know, facilities people, and again, you know, people who basically help maintain things, you know, help maintain the buildings, the infrastructure, even the instrumentation. So there's many more people to turn to if you need something than there is at a university. I think at a university, it's much more of a sense of independence on the parts of the faculty.
Is it a drain on you to, you know, balance both positions?
I wouldn't call it a drain, but I think it does take some planning. We have laboratories at several locations, so I think making sure that the laboratories are functioning and planning ahead as to what student is going to be where when takes some planning and just a little bit more travel back and forth. But the opportunity is to work, you know, with students and work in a national lab environment. So I like it a lot, but you have to be a little proactive and think in advance on how you're going to organize things.
I'd like to get to more about the science, actually specifically more about the battery for which you have received the National Medal of Technology and Innovation. Tell us about that.
Going to the White House and receiving the National Medal of Technology and Innovation from President Obama, in terms of recognition, has got to be, you know, the professional high point for me. It was just an extraordinary experience to meet the president personally, you know, be at the White House. The year that I received the medal, there were 3 individuals aside from me, and then 1 company. So it was a very small group that won the medal. And it was really just a remarkable event to be part of that and to have that level of recognition. People always ask me, what did the president say? Because when he shook my hand and offered his congratulations, people could say, and could see, you know, that he was moving his mouth, you know, so he was saying something. And he knew right away. He said, so you're the person who was responsible for saving millions of lives through your scientific work. And I said, yes, Mr. President, I think that I am. And so that's what he said. And it was a really, really great experience.
It would be interesting to know for you to tell us why what you've done, your work, led to saving of millions of lives.
So the battery for the defibrillator was developed to provide the device greater longevity. The device had been proven on in a limited clinical sense. So it was clear that there was let's say there was a lot of optimism and good preliminary data that said that the implantable defibrillator would be effective. But in order to be used in a widespread way, it really needed to provide enough longevity that people wouldn't be having surgery too frequently, not just because of the fact that surgery on people who are ill to begin with is difficult, but in order to be economically viable, it would help if the device lasted a long time. So the battery, I believe, in many ways enabled the widespread use of the implantable defibrillator. And what the defibrillator does is that it interrupts a certain form of heart attack. And this is a heart attack that is due to ventricular arrhythmia. And ventricular arrhythmias are almost always fatal without external intervention. So that's why external defibrillators have become so prolific. They're in many places. They're in airports, they're in sports arenas, because there's such a short period of time to save someone's life.
Right, right.
And so for people who have exhibited a tendency towards this, or even a prior episode where they were revived, the implantable defibrillator becomes really a life-saving device. And the statistics show it, that they did clinical trials and compared, basically a control group of people with people who had the implantable defibrillator. And it's not that the control group didn't get any therapy. They would have gotten the best, drug therapy available. At a 2-year point, the survival rate is extraordinarily different. That with the people who don't have the device, the survival is less than 30%. And for the people who do have the device, it's almost the opposite, that the survival rate is greater than 70%. So it became clear during the course of the clinical trials. I think they actually even stopped several of the clinical trials because the device was so effective. And it's that contribution helping to make that device a widespread reality that really has made a difference. Today, there's probably 300,000 or so devices implanted every year. So, wow. 1/3 people every year are alive, because of these devices.
So the president's research staff were pretty accurate when they said saving millions.
Yeah. So let me tell you another funny story. The way I was notified about the National Medal of Technology, I knew that I was a candidate because actually I had been contacted by the FBI, and they basically told me that I had to give them permission to do a background check. So I knew that I was a candidate, but I didn't know that I was going to be a recipient. And I had been traveling, and I was driving back from the airport. I was driving from the airport to my office in the university, and I had stopped at a red light, and my cell phone rang, and because I was stopped at a light, I picked up my cell phone, and the person on the phone said, "This is the White House calling. Can you talk?" So I look up, and the light changes, and I look behind me, and there's a police car immediately behind me. And I said, "No, I can't talk." I said, "Call me in 15 minutes in my office," and I hung up. So I can tell you, I hung up on the White House. So.
That's a good story. Sorry, not now.
Sorry, busy. Of course, they were, very understanding, and I explained what happened. But I thought that's the last thing I need is, a ticket. Oh, I'm talking to the White House. Oh, sure you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So there you go.
And you were the first woman to win the National Medal of Technology. Fabulous success. And with all that success, do you feel that it was hard being a woman at the beginning of your scientific career?
So that would be something interesting for the ECS to do, because over the course of my career, this is my casual impression, that when I first started attending the ECS in the 80s, I think that there were not very many female speakers, and I think that there were not very many female participants in the audience. I think compiling those statistics over the years would be really difficult to do.
Yes.
But over the course of, the 80s till now, I can really see that things have changed dramatically. There's many, many more female presenters. When I look through the audience, it's gratifying to see how many females are in the audience now. I think that what it took more than anything was just a desire not to give up and to understand that it's kind of, sometimes it's the sense of you go to a party and you find out that it was a costume party and nobody told you, and you're kind of looking around saying, gee, should I really be here? That kind of feeling.
Yeah.
But then you think, well, I'm doing something important. I think I have a contribution to make. This is pretty interesting work. hang in there and keep going. And I think also being surrounded by people who believe in you, you know, at an early age, you know, my mother and my father, my husband has been an endless, you know, advocate, and in many ways mentor as well, you know, because we talk about a lot of things and he has great advice. You know, having your own support system makes a really big difference. And, you know, then it's the obvious. It's the only life I've ever known. So I don't know what it's like on the other side. Right? So, yeah. But no regrets. It's been great.
No, but you're right in identifying the change here at our meetings, in our membership, everywhere, in our leadership. It's everywhere. And there's a lot written, and there's still obstacles, STEM education and fields. Do you think there's some big things that are remaining that could be done?
I think that the good news is that more and more at the student level, I think that female students are participating in sciences and continuing on to, you know, get degrees in science. But my casual observation is that the big attrition happens actually kind of early to mid-career, that for whatever reason, you know, people just decide that it's not for them. And that may be the point where, you know, mentorship or a support system becomes important. And, you know, actually not by my own doing, but I find that several women now who are in earlier stages of their career will ask me, you know, gee, you know, I'm faced with this, what should I do? You know, should I complain to my boss? Should I, you know, quit? Should I do this? You know, should I do that? And I don't have any magic advice. I think sometimes it's a question of listening and then just offering perspective on what I've witnessed over the years. And I think for people to know that somebody else has done it and somebody else has survived and thrived is helpful, because then they think they can do it too.
So I've known you for a pretty long time, but I did not know the golf ball story. And so I think when they come to you for advice, I think the golf ball story is important. I think your resilience is well, that's a key to anything.
Well, the other story that's related to that I remember distinctly, and I might have even been younger, when I was growing up, we had a driveway that was made out of, I guess they call them river stones. So they're polished pebbles, and they're actually, so it wasn't a paved driveway, it was a pebble driveway. But these were very lovely stones. You know, they're kind of rounded and smooth, and they're all different colors. So, but at the side of our house, we had a concrete pad, you know, where you would actually enter into the house. So I remember that I would take a steel hammer and I would smash the pebbles, because every once in a while, when you cracked one open, you would find these layers and like shells of multicolored, you know, rocks and stones. So I used to spend, you know, hours smashing rocks on the side of the house. So I think to myself, you know, boy, my parents must have been pretty understanding to let me do this.
Yeah, definitely.
But again, I guess I think of it because I think it shows some innate curiosity, like what's in there anyway, you know?
Yeah, so. Although, you know, as a parent myself, I'm thinking, I don't know what I would make of all of that. You know?
Exactly.
But well, it led to something good.
There you go. There you go.
Well, we like to, the last thing I'd like to bring into the conversation is the experience at ECS, which you already commented on. But your experience is not unique, but it's at a level that not a lot of people reach, because you're a former president and you've been highly recognized, and so it's a question of recognition as well as you know, the leadership, you know, beyond just your scientific contribution and sharing of that, and all of that wrapped into, you know, just a question about how your experience in the society influenced your career.
I think being part of the ECS has really been been great, and I truly mean this. The cross-section of participants, both in terms of background, meaning academic, industrial, national lab, and country of origin. You know, we've got people from all over the world who attend these meetings. So in my field in batteries, we really get the best of the best from, you know, from every corner of the world, from Europe, from Asia, from North America, you know, wherever they are, you know, they come to ECS meetings. So it's such an opportunity to really come up to speed over the course of, you know, 3, 4, 5 days and understand what the cutting edge is at that point in time. Cutting edge in product, cutting edge in science. So scientifically, it's just been a great organization to be part of. And the other thing I really like about the ECS, and I think the ECS does extraordinarily well, and honestly, Rocky, this is a tribute to you and a tribute to the staff. For the folks who are largely interested in the science, everything that you do is invisible to them. So they come, and because they want to interact with their scientific colleagues, because they, you know, want to take part in these meetings, you know, they want to hear the presentations. And I think many people, I think if you ask them, you know, is there a lot of work instead of a meeting? I think they rationally know that. Oh, of course, you know, there must be a lot of work. But they don't really see it. You know, they don't understand that the governance is, the thing that I appreciate about the ECS staff is that the governance of the society is basically by, you know, scientists who volunteer. And it's hard enough to corral people that you actually like employ and pay, you know, or hold a degree over their heads. But you guys somehow manage to corral people who just volunteer and who are strong personalities to begin with. And so it's really masterful to organize things as well as they are at the meetings. But beyond that, the society has been around for a long time. And science, technology, the world, how we communicate has changed so much. And, you know, in the last 10 years even, gone from, you know, a paper-based world to almost an entirely electronic world. And the ability to be resilient, the ability to be versatile, to recognize when you have to make changes is a test of any organization. And I think the ECS has not only survived but thrived because it's willing to make changes and move with the times and not just say, oh, well, you know, this is what we've always done, so if we've always done it this way, you know, of course we have to keep doing it that way. The ECS doesn't behave that way. I mean, of course, there are individual people in a society who struggle with change, but a society can't stop change. You know, society really needs to understand how to respond and when to lead, you know, when to follow, when to be proactive, when to wait and see how things are going to develop in the external world before overreacting. And I think over the years, I think the ECS has really done that extremely well. And by being president, it gave me better visibility of that. As a scientific attendee, it's not as apparent what it takes to keep the society successful. So I think by being president, it gave me an even better appreciation of what it's all about. And I'm honored actually to have been able to do it and play a small part.
Well, I certainly appreciate those comments, I know my experience with you and many others have, you know, I mean, you all are responsible for creating that culture. The last thing is I just want to maybe make it an open-ended question, a thought about your accomplishments, the thing that makes you most proud, maybe the last thing you want to say about where you are, what got you here.
Scientific participation and scientific discovery is in many ways a combination of one step at a time, and realizing that it's a marathon and not a sprint. You know, that you have to be in it for the long haul. And that doesn't mean that there aren't times when you're running faster and running slower, but I think the key is to keep going. And I think, you know, that kind of reflects the ECS organization. I think that reflects my career. And I wouldn't second guess what I've done. You know, I wouldn't change a thing. Every day is exciting. You know, the scientific world that I live in, it's as exciting as it's ever been. And I hope that that interest in electrochemistry and fields related to electrochemistry continues to be on the upswing, because for me, it's been a great place to be, a great area to be involved in for all these many years. So, yeah, no regrets. It's been wonderful.